Are we ready? Well, I would start off with this. I never said this. There are many nations in the world. But there are 8 persecutory nations, if you're aware of that.
There were 8 what?
8 persecutory nations. Did I ever speak about this?
Persecutory?
Persecutory. Persecute, from the word persecute. Nations that can persecute Klal Yisrael.
Not 4? It doesn't correspond to goals?
8.
What is them called?
What does that mean? We know that we know. That there are 3 ways to do the tikkun. There are 3 ways to do the tikkun, to rectify creation. One is mitzvahs. You do mitzvahs, you rectify creation, without getting into that, because that's Derech Hashem. The second way is tshuva. If you sin and you do tshuva, you also rectify creation. But what happens if you do neither? You don't do tshuva, you don't do enough mitzvahs. So what the Roshim then goes into what's called yisurin, or suffering. So suffering is the way to rectify creation. Suffering. As such, Klal Yisrael, actually it's really in today's parsha, which is interesting. So therefore, Klal Yisrael, if they don't do enough mitzvahs and they don't do enough tshuva, so Rosh Hashanah now brings them into the parsha, what's called the tikkun device of yisurin, or suffering. The question is, suffering by who? Now there are many kinds of suffering in the world, many. But what the Rosh Hashanah has done is he has assigned 8 nations. They have the status that if Klal Yisrael needs to suffer, because that's the 3rd tikkun device, then these nations are the one that does it. Okay? Which is very interesting, which answers a very interesting question on today's parsha, which is Parshas told us. We see that when Esav came to Yaakov Yitzchak for a bracha, so he said to him, okay, I'm here, let me have a bracha. So Yitzchak said to him, who are you? So Esav said, of course, I'm Esav, your Bechor, your firstborn. So Yitzchak realized, whatever, Charod Gedola ad Mioid. It was very difficult to understand. Incredible fear. Because the obvious question to that is, what should the emotion of Yitzchak have been? Rage, not fear. Because he realized that Yaakov Avinu, his other son, deceived him. You people get deceived, usually are very angry at that. But you don't find Yitzchak getting angry. You find him having an unbelievable fear. Anyway, that's a very important concept, but without getting into that. So Esav, of course, it's like he evokes pity, in anybody, because, he's a guy who was so looking forward to his bracha of Yitzchak. Now he doesn't have it. So Yitzchak gives him a bracha. He says that everything I gave Yaakov will be true, will be fulfilled. But if he doesn't do what he has to do, then you will be able to persecute him. You will be able to subdue him. So the question is, why would Yitzchak do that? Why would Yitzchak do that? Assign Esav that if he doesn't do his job, Yaakov, so then Esav can go after him. The answer is a very important answer.
What kind of bracha? Is it a bracha?
What?
Doesn't sound like a bracha to me.
Like a what?
Doesn't sound like a bracha really.
A bracha.
Doesn't sound.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a bracha. No, you do that to Yaakov. But the truth is, because Yitzchak, of course, knows, there are eight persecutory nations. There are 8 nations that, if Klal Yisrael needs to suffer because they're not doing enough mitzvahs or tshuva, okay, then there are 8 nations that can do the job of Yisur, persecuting them. whatever it means, whether it means really persecuting them, destroying them, or just limiting them economically, whatever. Who are the 8? Well, the first one was Egypt.
Why does it have to be Dafka 8? Why can't it be anybody?
Well, let me go through the list.
Probably Egypt, Bavel, Paras. And,
Mitzrayim
Edom,
was the
Edom.
first. And Mitzrayim was unique. Without getting into why, Egypt was unique. But that was its assignment. And so on. After Mitzrayim, there are the 4 nations that are Shibud Malchus. They subjugate the Jewish people under their rulership. You have Babylon, Babel, right? You have Persia, Porus. You have Greece, Yovan. And you have Rome, Edom, who is really Esau, right? You have those 4. So what do we got? 5. But in addition to them, right, there are 2 others.
Ishmael also.
What?
Rabbi Ishmael.
Yes. There's also 3 others. Besides these 5. Who are they?
Ishmael.
Ishmael is one. Arabs.
That leaves
Or
us
Islam, if you want to look at it that way. Right? Who else is there besides Ishmael? Amalek. Who, even though he's a descendant of Esau, he has a special status. Amalek. But that leaves us how many? With 7. Who's number 8? Anybody know?
Erev Rav, no?
Erev. Who is not really a nation, it's really Jews.
Erev Rav.
Yes. Erev. Correct. Who are Jews. They have the same
Where is all
concept.
this stated? These 8. Where are they?
Were they stated? I don't know where they're stated, but this is the...
What about the others? Aram, the Plishtim, the...
They don't have the major persecutory status. They have it, look, let's face it, some guy comes and kills a Jew. They don't
Aram
have
did more than
that.
that. They exiled 10.
I mean,
Ten
what about Ammon and Moab? All the, these, the little guys at the fringe, and so on and so forth.
Crusades and
Look, let's put it this way. There are peoples that can persecute Jews. You know what I'm saying? But the ones that are given the real status are these 8. Certainly Egypt, that's major. Certainly the 4, that's Chazal. And those four Malchus kingdoms are stated many times in the Merumans the Torah. But Gamas Agoy Dona Noichi.
But are there original Egyptians today, or are they?
No, there are no real Egyptians. Egypt is Arab, not Egypt.
They're all Arabs, come on. Even Persia is Arab.
No,
It's
no.
It's Shiite.
No.
Shiite Muslims.
You're confusing a religion with a people. It happens to be Persian instead of being Zoroastrians, which they used to be, right? They happen to be Muslim, but they're Persians. Persia is a true ethnic race that's not Arab. You see what I'm saying? Arabs only constitute 10% of Islam. I don't know if you're aware of that. The Arabs are only 10% of Islam. Most Muslims are not Arabs. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country, whatever. Pakistan, they're not Arab. They're Pakistan, they're Indian, whatever these guys are, right? And so on. But anyway,
What's number 9? We mentioned 8.
8.
I mentioned 8. So the Erev Rav is the 8th. Although the Erev Rav is not really what? It's not a nation. It's Jews that persecute Jews. Or it's a shibud. So those are the 8. Now, in the end of days, and that's what I'm not going through the history of all of them. By the way, did anybody know the origin of the Erev Rav? We know what's the Erev.
They were Egyptians.
Where?
They were Egyptians.
Well, the Erev Rav were Egyptians
That converted to
Judaism. Right? And Rabbi Mendel said, you don't want these guys. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, no. And then so the Erev Rav is the ones who are responsible for the Chet Egel. Right? Right? The Chet Egel and so on. But an Erev Rav is much different than what we think. Which you have to understand.
They're real
what
Jews?
the Erev Rav, what?
They're real Jews or not really?
It should be Jews, yeah.
The J Street would be considered Erev Rav.
Who?
The J Street Jews.
Well, I don't look at
Those
Erev Rav
Kinnick
as...
Shnishpas, no?
Yeah, wait. I have to differentiate here. Leaders are Erev Rav. I don't look at people as Erev Rav. People make mistakes. I look at them as either Amaratzim, Tinnik Shenishba, or just mislaid Jews, or whatever. Leaders are Erev Rav. You want to know who the Erev Rav today is, right? You have the Reform movement. Leaders, Erev Rav. Conservative, Reconstructionists, those guys, they're all Erev Rav. Okay? And they're a result in Germany. The Erev Rav, however, of Israel, right, comes from the Enlightenment, the Haskalah, which is in the East, Russia, and so on. And those guys are basically Lakewood is Erev Rav. I mean, you name names, all the what do you call it, the Mapai, all these guys are Erev Rav, no question about that. Unfortunately, even Lakewood is Erev Rav. You have to understand, what is an Erev Rav, really? What's it mean?
Would Netanyahu be considered an Erev Rav?
Yes. He's an
Even
Erev
though
Rav.
he's
Doesn't make
traditional,
difference.
even though
He's
he's
not
a
really
traditional
traditional.
Jew?
He's not traditional.
Would Mishachisten be, would be Mishachisten be Erev
He's a
Rav?
very good
He serves
opportunist.
the Netanyahu.
He knows exactly which way the wind is blowing. It's like Clinton. Very good. They can really gauge the wind, but he's not. I would never. Begin was a traditionalist. Begin. But I would never say Netanyahu. Sharon Zecha Erev Rav, and so on. But what is an Erev Rav? Do I know what an Erev Rav really is? In fact, the real question is, what's the origin of the Erev Rav?
The Egyptian converts.
Who?
The Egyptian converts that converted to
No.
Judaism.
Okay.
Because they were opportunists.
Let me tell you an Erev Rav. The origin of the Erev Rav, if you really think about that, and then you have to understand why I'm really giving a real introduction to Erev Rav and so on. The origin of the Erev Rav is in next week's Parsha, Vayishlach. When Yaakov Avinu is about to... Oh, I mean 2 weeks Parsha. When Yaakov Avinu is about to meet Esav, right? He says something very interesting. He says, Hatzileni no miyad ochi miyad Esav. So the question obviously is, miyad ochi miyad Esav. I mean, we know Esav is ochi, right? Why repeat that? So what it means is that what Yaakov said, save me, when Esav comes as my brother. Forget about if he comes as my enemy. Save me if he comes as my brother. Okay. And then miyad Esav, save me if he comes as Esav as my enemy. What does that mean, if he comes as my brother? It's a very important concept, and there's an origin for that. When these people come, then you'll understand what this kuf of the last 22 years really is. What's really going on? But the concept of an Erev Rav is fundamentally a brother that wants to convince you of something else. Okay, what does that mean? What's the uniqueness of the Jewish people? It happens to be the Torah. The Jews are a nation of the Torah. The Torah defines the Jew. Okay, it characterizes the Jew. Okay, and it's responsible for the essence of what Judaism is. However, the Erev Rav are people who are Jews that want to convince you otherwise. They want to say, we are unique not because of the Torah. In fact, they recognize that the Torah is great literature, like Shakespeare. But what makes the Jew unique is not the Torah. It's the culture. We are people, we have culture. We have a lot of Jews who have filter fish, kugel. There's a lot of good stuff that Jews have given the world. Knedler, all of those guys into this, And then in the culture, the scientists, Einstein and Hollywood is Mayer, all these guys are Jewish and so on and so
Don't
forth.
forget the Schmaltzering.
Schmalzering, of course, This is all Jewish culture. They want to convince Jews that the uniqueness of a Jew is not the Torah, it is the culture. Then there are people, Shimon Peres, for instance, who wants to convince you that it's not even a culture. It's because we're all Middle East citizens, you see. That's what our uniqueness is. All of this is connected to Torah. But not only that, it is the most dangerous enemy that ever was. Why? Because you don't suspect this guy that he's going to destroy you. You see, you don't realize that an Erev Rav is the greatest enemy of Klal Yisrael. Why? Because people do not suspect him of destroying you, because he's my brother, right? Why would my brother want to destroy me? You see, so therefore they will give ear. They will listen to the ear of Rav, because people don't realize. In many ways, it's called a fifth column. It's within you, and they're the worst enemy of all. It's like the Navi says, your enemy will come from within you. What's a modern day example of an Erev Rav? Which is very interesting. I want a medical example of the Erev Rav. And it's the worst one of all. Cancer. What is cancer really? It's the body's own cells that go awry. They no longer die after 50 multiplications, reproductions. They go on forever. A cancer cell is immortal. Somehow they've beaten the concept where the cell cannot reproduce more than 50 times. The problem is that since a cancer cell fundamentally is you, the body doesn't recognize it as you. It sees the cancer cell as self, not as other, and therefore doesn't attack it. And that's obviously what produces all the major problems, because it doesn't see these cells as a sinner attacking them. The Erev Rav is a cancer. It's a tumor. Okay? It's a tumor. Why? Because we don't see that these people are really their brothers, but they wish to destroy the body of Klal Yisrael. That's what the Erev Rav is. And the origin of this concept is Hatzileni miyad ochi, save me from my brother. Yaakov realized that. He says, because Esav comes as my brother, doesn't mean he want to kill me. Of course he wants to kill me. But he's going to come as a brother, which means that, oh, everything is fine. I want to show you the right way and all that. And people do not suspect that he's really destroying you. That's the concept of Erev Rav. Got it? And many people, therefore, the philosophy of an Erev Rav can be anybody. And now you understand the Reformed. Of course we're religion, but what do you mean religion? Reformed or conservative, Reconstructionist, they're all Erev Rav, all of them. And the same thing with the Haskalah movement, right? The same thing with many of the Israeli parties. They're all Erev Rav, because they want to destroy Torah as the fundamental uniqueness of Klal Yisrael. Now you understand what an Erev Rav is.
So why did Rabbeinu want to accept them?
Why? Because he thought they would, well, first of all, it's the first instance.
And he was the biggest Navi that we ever had.
Well, I don't know if he did not.
Because he saw Yisro.
The Moshe told him, you don't want these guys.
Yisro was a ger,
Yeah.
so he saw Yisro was able.
But he wasn't an Erev Rav, Yisro.
But
Yisro
listen.
was an emissary here.
Anyway, I want to get on.
Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to take him.
Now, I want to get on. Okay. When is the Erev Rav used? When do they come for the fore? This is the question. When is it their hour that
By
they
the
shine?
April they came.
They always come, okay, when the redemption is about to happen. That's when they show up. By Matan Torah, that should have been the end of history. When Moshe Rabbeinu would have been Mashiach ben Yosef, and all of a sudden they pop up. Why is that? The concept of an Erev Rav being Matzliach is always an end. That's how you know it's... By the way, one of the simonim that we're near the end is because the Erev Rav is so powerful. That's how we know. Question is why? And the answer is because the job of the Jew, in many ways, is to take away the koyach of the Satan. It's called sparks of holiness, Tzeitik Kedusha. When we sin, we give him Kedusha. So one of our jobs is to take back all the Kedusha that we gave the Satan. When most of the Kedusha is back in the hands of the Jews, so what can the Satan do? So therefore he has to go to Jews, right, that will coax the other Jews into sinning so he can take back his sparks. That's why it's always the end, because all the Jews have all the sparks. All the Jews have all the Kedusha. So he's got to go to them to take it back. You see, and who does he go to? He goes to the Erev Rav. You see. So he goes to the Jews that have that koyach, and to try to convince their Jews and so on to sin, so he could take it back. That's the concept of an Erev Rav. Okay, today they are Shoilet. This is the day of the Erev Rav, and because yeah.
I don't understand why they have to go so far to say the Arab. In the last 20 years, he brought internet into the world.
Who's he?
The Sultan.
He bought into what?
Internet into the world.
Yeah, what about the internet?
So that's his tool now. It's
I'm not saying the Erev is the only thing. There are other ways. There are other things going on. You know what I'm saying? But the Erev Rav rises. If you ask yourself, now there's internet. Well, who's responsible for so much of the assimilation? It's not the internet. Internet is what the Erev Rav wants is to assimilate, is to remove the Torah. The internet doesn't remove the Torah. The internet causes you to sin. There's a difference. You know what I'm saying? The Erev Rav wants to destroy the identity of Klal Yisrael. The internet wants to destroy your purity. There's two different, there are different machlas, if you want to use that, you see? So, of course there are other things going on, but it doesn't destroy your identity. After you finish with the internet, you still know you're Jewish, When you get to an Erev Rav, they talk you out of it and say, you're into a different religion, and so on, it's a tremendous difference between the two. Anyway, therefore, now, so the Erev Rav really in many ways indicates an end, that we're near the end, and that's why they're shoylate, which is a very interesting concept. Anyway, so we come to the year 1989. This world has
Before you
what?
do that, how do we see we're near the end because of the Erev Rav?
Because, as I said, because all the Kiddush is back in the hands of Klal Yisrael. So therefore the Sultan has to go to Jews to convince Jews to go off the derech. This is the problem.
But how do we know that?
Because he has no power.
How do
What?
we know that's near the end?
No, that is the end.
Where did we see
When we
before
divest
history
the
that it was by
Sultan,
the end? What?
when we divest the Sultan of all his koyach, he's dead. That's his death.
Oh, you mean he has to resort to the Erev Rav?
Yeah, in order to get it back.
Also, but before that, let's say, if not all the Kiddush is in Klal Yisrael, then what does Satan do? Where does he go for?
Then he's the Umas Oilam.
How does he get
nations
it
of the
from
world.
them? For Eden, he makes
Well,
them
he
sin.
uses the Umas Oilam to persecute the Jews. To try to get them off the derech. I mean, well, whatever. I don't want to go into all that, but I'm just saying, it all depends. But the Erev Rav is an end type of thing. That's how I know we're at the end, because the Erev Rav should they dominate.
Also, the only way for Satan to get Kiddusha from other nations is to make them persecute Jews, or how does he get when it's an Umas Oilam? How does Satan get it Kiddusha from Umas Oilam? What's the way to get?
No, so he's trying to get the Umas Oilam to either get the Jews to sin.
What are
whatever.
the Jews? Umas Oilam have Kiddusha. Why do
No,
they have
no,
to?
They don't.
You
The Sultan.
remove Kedusha till it comes in its place.
Yeah, I don't want to go astray. I want to focus on what's happening.
What's
Next 20 years.
number 9, by the way? We never mentioned
Who?
number
There's
9.
no number 9. I said
No, you
the
said
eight.
9. Oh,
I said
8.
8. That's said 8. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Those are the 8 major peoples and so on. Now, in 1989 of September, that was 5,750. What's very important to know is that there's a calendar. It's a calendar. The world will exist for 6,000 years. That's how long it will exist. The 7,000th year, the world begins to change. So for 6,000 years, the world exists. Okay. However, the 6 days of creation are comparable or parallel to the 6,000 years. Why? Because like David HaMelech says, one day in your eyes is like 1,000 years. So the 6 days of creation really parallels the 6,000 years. So we have the 6,000 year calendar, right, the creation, and we have the creation calendar, 6 days, okay? If you look at those two things, it reveals many, many different things that are going on. But one of the interesting ideas is that when it really begins to get interesting is Thursday night. Thursday night, let's say 6 p.m., right? That's the beginning of what? Of Friday. because the day starts, right, from the evening, right? So Friday at 6 p.m., or Thursday night at 6 p.m., according to the English side, right, is the beginning of Friday. Friday is Erev Shabbos. What year corresponds on the, not creation calendar, but on the world calendar, right? The answer, what corresponds to the English year, the sixth day, is the beginning of the sixth day. What's the English year? It's 1240. 1240 is the beginning of the year 5000. The year 5000 was the year 1240. It's a long time ago. And there were incredibly significant changes, which I'm not going to go into, okay? But what we do see is that the creation calendar has a lot to say about our calendar because they parallel each other. One of the most significant dates, okay, is 12 o'clock noon on the creation calendar, Friday at 12 o'clock. Why? Because the sun begins to set. In fact, it's the last day before Shabbos, right? The sun begins to set. It's the last day before Shabbos. Okay? And the sun will not rise again on that sixth day because then you have Shabbos. Therefore, the English year 1989 of September was Tafshin Nun. Tafshin Nun, which is 1989 September, is correspond on the creation calendar to Friday, 12 o'clock noon. So anybody who knows this, the concept of noon, Friday, on the creation calendar, and its parallel, which is 1989 September, right, with Rosh Hashanah, right, would know that Friday noon, afternoon, begins is the beginning of the end. Why? Because what does it say in the Torah? First of all, it's Beinu Arbayim. That's when Beinu Arbayim begins. And it says, V'hoyu li'eis erev. And it will be that at the evening time, yi'or, there will be light. In other words, the real redemption begins, really, in that time, September 1989. And V'hoyu li'eis erev yi'or, that begins Beinu Arbayim, and there we are. So therefore, if you think about it, okay, you have 1990, 1989. What happened? Well, incredible. You had what? The fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of communism, or I should say the end of Soviet Union. You had major things going on, in 1989. The rise of the internet, which I'm not going to get into, okay. You had the Berlin, like I say, the Berlin Wall collapsed, okay. You had the beginning of what? Also, the beginning of the rise of the Erev Rav, the real rise. You had who? You had Shamir, you had Rabin, you had Peres. These guys began to really rise at that point. Not only that, the Arabs came out of also at that point. That was the second Intifada. You had Oslo in 1993. Everything you see today began around September 1989, approximately. Why? Because this is what's happening. Because the redemption is based on that calendar. Now, even in Beinu Arbayim, you need to wait a half hour. Chatzi shor. Why? Because the shadow becomes distinct when the sun is no longer overhead, because then you don't see a shadow. When the sun begins to set in the west, a half hour, sheish v'chetzi, that's when you really begin to see, right, the Beinu Arbayim. When was sheish v'chetzi? When was sheish v'chetzi? For that half hour, maybe 42 years and 8 months is 1 hour on that clock, half hour.
9/11.
What?
9/11.
No, it wasn't 9/11.
Election.
No, so every 42 years and 8 months is 1 hour. It was the 1 hour of the creation clock or calendar is 42 years and 8 months. It's 42 years and 8 months, not 41 and 8 months, whatever. Okay? Maybe it's 41 and 8 months, whatever. And so on and so forth. So a half hour of that is what? Is 20, either 20 or 21 hours. 21 or 21 years. You know, so 1990, 21 years was what? 1971? It came out anyway. 1971 on Rosh Chodesh Av was exactly 6:30, 6 hours, and it means 12 o'clock, 12:30 was exactly Rosh Chodesh Av, I think, of 1971. Not bad. Then you'd really see an incredible acceleration of the Messianic process. And that's exactly what's happening. The whole Arab Spring happened after 1971. You know what I'm saying?
1970. You were starting with 1989, and 20 years after 1989
Yeah.
is 2009, 2008, 2009.
2011?
You said that you went backwards by mistake.
What was
Went
that?
backwards by
You went
mistake.
backwards by mistake.
I went backwards?
You said 1971.
What'd I say?
1971.
Oh, no. I'm not, yeah, no, that's wrong. No, I'm saying that
It's
if
like
you add,
2010 or almost 2011.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's when the whole Arab Spring began and so on.
Okay.
In other words, what I'm really saying is that since we're now by 6:30, you have an incredible acceleration of the process. And that's what you're really seeing right now. Now, what's happening? What does the acceleration of the process mean? Well, what the Rebbe seems to be doing is, first you have to understand that how does the Geula come? Does it come naturally or does it come al pi teva? That's the question. Does it come naturally or does it come through miracle? Naturally means
They
al pi
would see
teva?
through miracles from the Gemara.
Yes, no. If the Jews do the tikkun through Yisurin, then the messianic process will come naturally. Of course, it's miraculous, but it will look natural.
Doesn't the Gemara say there'll be great in this and by?
But that's Ben David. You need to wait. There's Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. When Mashiach ben David arrives, so then you'll see the Nisim. But Mashiach ben Yosef, when he arrives, you're going to see not the miraculous occurrences, you will see natural occurrences. They look natural, but they're really miraculous. Okay? So therefore, the whole messianic process is now coming about naturally. The fall of the Soviet Union, which is a miracle in itself, that looked it looked natural. The Berlin Wall collapse, all the World Trade Center, all of this looks natural. You see, it's not miraculous, although it really is miraculous, but it's happening because the major part of Tikkun is not through mitzvahs or tshuva, it's through Yisur. Therefore, the messianic process will come through the natural teva way. That's really what we're looking at. Okay, but the end of time, there are three nations that get together, or the three persecutory nations in that sense. There's Yishmael, there's Edom, and there's the Erev Rav. And that's really what you've seen, is the rise of the Erev Rav, to a great extent, the rise of Yishmael. But the interesting thing is all three need to do it. None of them have enough koyach by themselves, because the Satan is depleted from his strength.
You didn't say the third one.
Why?
You already said two. Shmuel.
Edom and the Erev Rav.
No, I said the Erev Rav and Edom.
Amalek doesn't figure
Edom.
into this.
I heard Persia. The rise
No,
of
no,
man.
no. Forget Persia. Put that aside, you know. In any case,
Amalek is one of the people. Amalek doesn't come into the picture here anymore.
no, they're at the end. They do at the end. They're Gog and Magog. They come at the end. Anyway, whatever. In any case, so therefore, right around 1989 is when major events began to happen, and so on, you know. The whole concept of the collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise, the reunification of Germany, the collapse of the Soviet Union, you know what I'm saying? Tremendous amount of things happened. The rise of the Erev Rav, the rise of Yishmael, all of that began right around 1989, or shortly thereafter. Why? Because that's noon. We, however, are worse in the sense that we are after Chatzos. We are after Chatzos 12:30, which is a much greater acceleration. And this is really what we're seeing. Now, what has to happen? Well, remember, things are happening on Yidei Teva. They're happening naturally. So what does that mean if they're happening naturally? Well, we have the fall of the Soviet Union, very important, okay? The reunification of Germany, which is very important. The rise of the rise of the Erev Rabbin in Paris, which is very important. Okay, the rise of Yishmael. Before 1989, they were subdued, right? It's by the Second Intifada that they really came out to sort of claim what they feel they should have and so on. So that really began around 1989. But what's interesting, what's the plan here? What is the real plan? Well, without getting to, just the Edom and so on and so forth, we see something interesting. We see Oslo. What is Oslo really about? Oslo started on September 13th, 1993. What was the point of Oslo? Oslo is the beginning of the end. It's the beginning of the end. Okay. What does that mean? That's the beginning of the end. What the Jews did is something terrible. The truth is, what they did with Oslo is a death sentence. That's one of the reasons why they're having so many problems. Those guys who did Oslo should be hanged. Why? Imagine two guys come to court, right? And the reason why they come to court, because one guy says to the other guy, you stole my property. So what did the judge do? So the judge says, okay, you say that he stole your property. So the guy says, not really, it's really his property. So the judge says, it's his property. What are you doing here? What the Jews did is they legitimatized the claim of the Arabs. That never happened before. It was always the Arabs trying to get part of Eretz Israel. But the Jews never legitimatized their claim that you're right. By Oslo, they legitimatized their claim. They said, you're right. You do have a chelik in Eretz Israel. Yeah, but that's terrible, because all they did was give a yad, a hand, to all the anti-Semites that want to destroy the Jews, and the way they're going to destroy them is give part of Eretz Israel back to the Arabs, right? And then the Arabs will destroy the rest of the Jews, which is what happened now. They gave Gaza back. Look what's happening, right? They have the Judea and Samaria. By letting the Arabs in, ultimately, Yishmael would destroy the Jews. So therefore, the most terrible thing they did, what Oslo did, which in many ways ultimately is a death sentence for the Jews, if not for the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom will intercede and stop it, is they legitimatized the rights of the Arabs over Eretz Israel. In essence, therefore, they stood back and said, part of Eretz Israel is yours, the question is how much, how we settle it, and so on. That's what Oslo did. So the question is, what's really happening behind this? But it's just more than that, right? After Oslo, what happened? You have Arafat. Now, Arafat was recognized by the UN. In fact, Arafat was the most who ever slept in the White House. He was in the White House more than any other statesman. So the UN made him a statesman. He has this gunslinger Arab, right? Arafat, the worst of the worst. All of a sudden, everybody recognizes him. He becomes a respectable what? He becomes a respectable statesman. In other words, they gave him credibility. And by Clinton inviting him so often to the White House, he gave him enormous respect and enormous credibility. The question is, what does all this mean, really? But what's interesting about that is this, okay? Meanwhile, what's Arafat is doing? Arafat, they're killing Jews. Remember Rabin, sacrifice for peace? Remember that whole statement and so on? They're killing Jews left and right. They're bombing cafeterias and restaurants in Israel, and all Rabin says is sacrifice for peace. What is he talking about, sacrifice for peace? Ultimately, he himself was a sacrifice for peace. It's like a Mida Keneged Mida business, What does all this mean? We know the Bershom orchestrates everything, even the rise of the Erev Rav. But why did the Erev Rav rise? Besides what I say, is that the Sultan is losing his hold, and therefore he has to come for the Jews to destroy the Jews. There's something more important, why the Erev Rav has to rise. We know that in the end of time, Edom has to fall. Esav has to fall. Esav has to fall. Edom. Okay? That's one of the things that has to happen. But we know something else. That the Baruch Hashem is going to give Eretz Yisrael back to the Jews. How's he going to do it? You know. So what you're watching is an incredible scenario of ultimately Israel coming back to the Jews. But how? How is that going to happen? So Oslo legitimatizes their claim. You see. So what does that do? That encourages the Arabs. Wow, you're assuming or you're saying that we have a right to Israel. So that's the first thing that Oslo did. Arafat killing Jews and the Jews doing nothing, they lose their fear of the government, because we see the government does nothing. It's an empty tiger. See, it's a paper tiger, the government. They say this and that, and they do nothing. You see, not only that, so Oslo legitimatizes their claims. The fact that the government does nothing while they're killing Jews, okay, emboldens them. And they begin to see that the government of Israel is a paper tiger. That's why it's so bad that the government does nothing. But more important, Clinton gives them respect, Arafat, credibility. And all of a sudden the nations of the world get behind Arafat, right? Because they themselves have everything to gain by Israel going back to the Arabs. The anti-Semites they know that the Arabs theologically are commanded to kill the Jews because they're infidels. So the greatest way for, the new form of anti-Semitism is anti-Israel, or is the peace process. The peace process became a way that an anti-Semite can kill the Jews. Because to force the Jews to do what? To give back Eretz Yisrael to the Arabs. And they know that theologically the Arabs will kill the Jews, which is exactly what they're doing. So the peace process is nothing more than a device for the anti-Semites to destroy the Jews. Because now they don't look like anti-Semites. When they say peace, we're peaceniks. See, they can hide behind this whole concept of the peace process to destroy the Jews. But meanwhile, look at what's happening. Clinton legitimatizes, it gives respect and credibility to Arafat. The UN allows Arafat to come in and make a speech. Clinton, by inviting him so many times to the White House, gives him enormous amount of credibility and respect in the eyes of the world. Because that's more than any other statesman, because that's what happens when you sleep in the White House. Okay? Israel comes all across as a paper tiger. That's next. Which is interesting. What the Russian did was very interesting. Why did Clinton become president, really? It's an interesting concept. Because what you're looking at the end, really, is not only the fall of communism, which is the beginning of the fall of Edom, because Edom is really falling and so on. But what the Russian wants to do is give Israel back to the Jews, al pi teva. But the problem, it won't really happen. Why? Because fundamentally, the Arabs are afraid of the Jews. There are too many reasons why they won't fight with the Jews. And ultimately speaking, the only way Israel will get back, the Jews will get back Israel, al pi teva, naturally, is if there's a massive war with the Arabs. Ultimately, what seems to be coming up is that the Russian wants a major war between the Jews and the Arabs. And therefore the Arabs will somehow be evicted and leave Eretz Yisrael. thereby giving the Jews back Eretz Yisrael. The problem, however, is that the Arabs are afraid. So what the Baruch Hashem is slowly doing is removing the fear that the Arabs have of the Jews. That's really what's happening. And this is the reason for all these events. So the first way to do that is Oslo. You see, the Arabs are afraid of the Jews, but wait a minute, the Jews now legitimatized their whole claim. Step one, Arafat kills Jews, and Rabin does nothing, so the government therefore is a paper tiger. That's number two. Clinton shows respect, credibility, and respect for the Arafat and for the Arabs. That's step number three. Each one of these events reduces the fear, because now the Arabs have credibility among the nations of the world because of Oslo. So what this does is it emboldens them ultimately, as we will see, to war with Israel. So we got three steps, you see. You know, what's interesting is, from that you begin to understand why Clinton had to be elected president. It's very interesting. Bush, Senior Bush, had an 88% approval rating. How in the world did he bring him down? The Russian wanted Clinton in. He wanted Bush out. Because Clinton is going to further the respect of the Arabs. So that's what the Russian wanted. So what did he do? He took a nobody from nowhere, Arkansas. What's Arkansas? Have you ever heard of Clinton before? Not only the incredible thing is, he was scandal-ridden. He was filled with scandals, if you remember 20 years ago, with all the women and so on and so forth. How is he going to become president of the United States? You can imagine the Rosham in front of the council with the Malachim. And the Rosham says, I need my guy. I need a guy like Clinton, because he's going to do my job. So the Malachim say, Clinton? Yeah, Clinton. The guy's a nobody from nowhere. You know what I'm saying? And not only that, he's filled with scandals. How's he going to become the president of the United States? So the Rosham says, listen, don't worry about it. You know, I'm God. Watch what I do. So what does the Rosham do? He makes Bush and his entire campaign forget that it was the economy. In fact, that was a statement of Clinton. It's the economy, stupid. Bush, since he never emphasized the economy, that's why he lost the election. Because of that idea. So therefore, in comes a guy who nobody knows, really, right? And not only that, there's scandals all over the place, yet he won over a guy who had 88% approval rating. Why? Because the Russian made his chachomim, all the campaign advisors, forget that the essential idea was the economy. You see. So therefore, all of a sudden, Clinton is in it. You see. So, fine, okay. So Clinton begins to do what? Right? He begins to press Israel, pressure Israel, not to retaliate, right? Not to retaliate if the Jews are dying, Oslo, and so on. That's what he begins to do. But the Baruch said, but the Malachim Taina to Rabban says, wait a minute. We understand you have Clinton, right? Who's there. But he's not going to push the Jews. He's not going to push the Jews to give away Eretz Yisrael, to legitimatize it. He's not going to push the Jews to withstand the slaughter of Jews at the hand of Arabs. So it's not going to work. So the Baruch then says to the Malachim, what's your problem? What's your problem? You don't think I could do it? Watch what I do. And we begin to understand why he took Clinton. It's very interesting, okay? Why did he take a guy who was nobody, from nowhere, who had an enormous amount of scandals with women? Why do you take a guy like this? You see? And the answer is because of what's about to happen. So the Malachim Taina, it's not going to work. He's not going to push Israel to do this, you know. The Baruch says, watch what I do. So the Baruch takes Clinton, okay, and he reveals the affair that Clinton had. The Baruch usually doesn't do that. He protects the office of the presidency, you know. But here the Russian was Megala what Clinton did, him and that other woman, for the entire world. Right? And that caused incredible embarrassment to Clinton. So therefore, what did Clinton need? Clinton needed a legitimacy. He had a whitewash. He had to have some kind of a legacy. What's the legacy of a president that has been tremendously tarnished? And the answer is peace in the Middle East. So therefore, Clinton was forced, or in many ways, he had to go overboard to restrain Israel because he wants a legacy after he's been tarnished with what's been going on. So that's why he took a guy that had low moral values, that the Russian knew that he would commit that type of an affair. And what the Russian would do is megala that to the world, forcing Clinton to whitewash that with some type of legacy, therefore forcing the Jews to back off so he should be able to do what? Have peace in the Middle East, and therefore he can come out looking good. You see, that's why in a certain sense we understand why he chose Clinton. Because Clinton is only a matter of time until he does that affair. The Russian is going to reveal it, forcing Clinton to have a legacy, right? And the legacy, of course, is going to be peace in the Middle East, therefore allowing Arabs to kill Jews, and Israel can do nothing. So the Malachim said, that's incredible. What a plan. It's an incredible plan. But there's only one problem. Right? What's the problem? Because if he's caught in the affair, and you're saying to whitewash he needs a legacy, right? And therefore he's going to restrain the Jews from getting back, right, at the Arabs and so on, right? The problem is he's going to be impeached. He committed a crime. So he's not going to last to do what you want him to do. So that's what the Malachim say. Can't do it because it'll never last, because the government of America won't stand for this immorality. They won't stand the fact that he perjured himself, and they're going to impeach him, and therefore Clinton can't go on and do what he has to do. So what does the Baruch say? Don't worry. Watch what I do. And now you understand this, another event. The reason why nobody wanted to go beyond impeachment, he was impeached, but he wasn't convicted. Why? Because the economy was incredible. Remember all the dot-coms? And now the dot goes, right? Remember those days, the economy was doing fabulous. There are many people that became millionaires in the time of Clinton. So they wouldn't touch Clinton because they all felt they don't want to touch the golden goose. You see? So what the Russian did is he protected Clinton from being convicted, just to be impeached, right? In order for him to continue with the legacy by forcing the Jews to back off so he can somehow make peace in the Middle East. See the whole equation, which is interesting. And you see the concept of why he was elected, why Russia was Megala that affair, okay? And why the economy was so phenomenal. And then, of course, after Clinton left office, the economy tanked, which is interesting, because you didn't need it anymore. In any case, all of this is to reduce the fear the Arabs have of the Jews, you see. And then we continue. It continues, right? So they're afraid of the Jews. But what happens? So the Russian now does, because he wants to accelerate the process with the Arabs who war with the Jews. So Eretz Yisrael can go back to who? To the Jews, Apiteva, right? So he has Hamas win the elections. And that enormously accelerates because he's now put Hamas, which is extremist, military extremists, in power. And nobody even realized that. They didn't realize that by allowing elections in Gaza, that's what Sharon did. And by the way, now you understand why what Sharon did to Gaza, why he evicted the Jews. Why did Moshe allow Sharon to evict all the Jews? Because by evicting the Jews, what happens? Then all of a sudden everybody saw that Hamas's shita, their method, right, wins. They won. That's why the Jews were kicked out. So if they win, right, if the Hamas, that their way of handling politics is good, guess what? Hamas will be into power. And the Russian wants Hamas in power because the military extremist is going to accelerate the process of war. Now you understand why Gaza happened. Because Gaza allowed Hamas to go into power. Because it vindicated the derech, the method of Hamas, of extreme militarism. And that's why the Baruch Shem allowed Sharon to do what he did. You see how it's called chess. It's called the Hashkafa chess pieces. But that's why it happened. So now Hamas is in power because Sharon evicted everybody, which gave tremendous credence to the method of Hamas, and now they're in power. So therefore, now the Baruch Shem has that chess piece in the game, where now Hamas is in power, which tremendous amount of extremists. What's next? But the Arabs still want war with the Jews. Why? Because they're all afraid of the IDF. They're not afraid of the government. They saw Rabin does nothing, right? Then now Hamas is in power, and Clinton then kept pushing the legitimacy and respect. Just look at the steps that the Baruch Shem takes to reduce the Arabs' fear of the Jews. But they're still afraid of the IDF. So along comes the Second Lebanese War, with 5,000 guys, right? 5,000 Hezbollah stood off the entire Israeli army. It was incredible. 1 million Jews ran away from the north. So what did the Arabs see? That we could take on Israel. 5,000 Arabs, Hezbollah, took on the whole IDF. And Israel did not win the war. But how does the Russian guarantee that this will happen? How does he guarantee that the IDF will lose? They lost. It came out looking terrible. In fact, the world was shocked at how in the world can the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, how could they have been beaten by 5,000 Hezbollah guys? And they were. And the answer to that is because the Baruch Shem made sure that 3 incompetent people will lead the Israeli government. And that's why they were elected. Who are they? Olmert, who's an arrogant, incredibly arrogant person.
Perez.
Wasn't Peres.
The other Perez.
Peretz. Who was an absolute incompetent Secretary of Defense.
Perez was Leah.
It's incredible. Here's a guy, Olmert, who thinks he's a military expert, right? Who's telling the IDF what to do. So here's one incompetent person. Because he took over the strategy of the IDF. Then Amir Peretz was looking for binoculars that were closed, and he says, yes, I see. I mean, it was an absolute fool. But how do you take a guy that knows nothing about military and make him, right, the Minister of Defense? Incompetent. And then the last guy, what was it? He was the Air Force guy.
Schultz.
Who?
Schultz.
No, what was his name? They made him an Air Force guy, the head of the entire IDF. And his shita was that the main way of winning a war was airplanes, and he was wrong. Chalutz, yeah. Of course, he resigned in disgrace. So you have 3 guys, incompetent, and that's why they were chosen. Because that would guarantee that the IDF will lose, and therefore the Arabs now have no more fear of the IDF. You see, this is right. You have a guy like Omar who interferes with the army. Peretz was an absolute incompetent guy, right? And Chalutz, who had the wrong shita. All 3 guaranteed that the Arabs would vanquish the Jews. Unbelievable. That's why we're there. So the Second Lebanese War happened in order to reduce the fear the Arabs have of the Jews, of the IDF. But wait a minute. Okay, it's not bad. Look at the steps. Look at it. For the last 15 years, every step is nothing more which will embolden the Arabs ultimately to do what? To war with the Jews. All the way starting from Rabin and Peres when they legitimatized by Oslo. Then you had Clinton, who pushed it further. Rabin, who let them kill, right? Then you have Gaza, that emboldened, that made sure that Hamas would get in. The Lebanese war, that made sure that they no longer respect the IDF, that they can get away with it. Yeah, they laugh at the Jews. That's why they're doing what they're doing now.
But Castleton.
But there's still something.
But Castleton.
Castleton was a disaster.
Why was it a disaster?
Because they should have cleaned up the mess. Instead, they backed off. Because what they saw by cast lead is that America could tell them to get out.
Well,
And they realized that Israel doesn't have the fortitude or resolve to destroy the Arabs. That again removes the fear of the Arabs. Because they realized that America has the ability to make Israel stand off. But there's still one thing that the Arabs are afraid of. Nukes. And now you understand why Iran is building a nuke. The last great fear the Arabs had was the nuclear technology. That Israel has the bomb. Who's developing the bomb? Iran. You see, that's why I knew that Iran was going to get the bomb. So therefore, the Arabs are no longer afraid of the Jews' nuclear device because Iran has the nuclear device. But wait a minute. To show you, each step is to embolden the Arabs. Like the Moshe wants them to war with the Jews. So he's removing all the deterrents, you see. But wait a minute, still no good. Because Hamas cannot take on the Jews. Come on, can't take on Israel. All the Arab nations together cannot take on Israel. Why? Because Mubarak is not against the Jews. He kept the peace for 30 years. So the Moshe has to get rid of Mubarak. How do you do that? The Arab Spring. You don't know, afterwards, Egypt has the greatest army, air force, and navy after Israel in the Middle East. They've been building up for 30 years. The U.S. has been giving them billions of dollars. They have an incredible, formidable army, navy, and air force. But the problem is Mubarak. What do you do with a guy like that? So Moshe says, don't worry. And there's the Arab Spring. That's why. That's why you have the Arab Spring, so that Egypt should become part of the Muslim Brotherhood. And not only that, they have all the armaments, you see. They're almost positioned where they think they could take over Israel. So you have all the Arab nations who are becoming, real extremist Arabs. You have the Muslim Brotherhood taking over the Arab world. And there we all know what they want to do. So they're no longer afraid of the Israeli government. They're not afraid of the IDF. Iran almost has the bomb. And now they have the Egyptian army to boot. So they're poised to take over Israel. Just take a look at the last 20 years. Everything that favors the Arabs happened. Because the Baruch Shem wants to remove the fear that the Arabs have of the Jews, and ultimately there's going to be a massive war between the Jews and the Arabs. And in that war, what seems to be is that the Jews will get back Eretz Yisrael without any Arabs. Something is going to happen. In fact, and we now understand even Obama. Because, would the Arabs be doing this if Mitt Romney was in? No. They know that. If Romney had won, that would have stopped the Arabs from being emboldened. Because Romney would not tolerate this. And they knew it. He said, the game's up. You guys don't mean peace. Romney would have opposed everything the Arabs did. No good. And that's why, even though there's a 7.9% of what? Of unemployment. It's incredible. What Obama did is beyond belief. He's the first president in American history to win when the economy is dread. You believe this? 7.9 million people are unemployed. 23 million people. 50% of college grads can't get jobs. And he becomes president with what?
It was a good month, 7.9.
What was that?
It was a good month, 7.9.
And that was worse?
It dipped under 8.
Yeah.
They said it was a big victory for him. Because it was over 8 all these months. The last 8
What makes sure, right? Just take a look at what's going on. If Romney wasn't president of the United States, then that would have destroyed the Arabs' ability to make war with Israel. Because Romney would have stopped them. Because he was he's good friends with Bibi. He would have stopped them. So Boshman has to stop Romney. America's going down the tubes, as they say, with the economy and everything and so on, right? Boshman has no problem. It's like the Arabs say, you want Obama. How are you going to do this? He says, don't worry. So what does the Baruch Shem do? What's a Makkah B'Patish? how do you get Obama to be president of the United States? Right? So one of the ways is to make Romney not realize that he's making mistakes. That's one way. But what the Barsham did is very interesting. How does he get Obama to be president? Only God can do this. It's amazing. Who?
Sandy.
What?
Sandy.
Sandy. Yeah. All of a sudden, Obama looked good. All of a sudden, he looked good. In fact, 42% of the exit polls said that was part of the consideration why they voted for Obama. 42%. Put him right over the top. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Sandy comes, right? That nobody understands where it came from. That's number one, because it's the end of the hurricane season. Yeah, how do you have a hurricane that's one of the most powerful hurricanes in the last 100 years come at the end of the hurricane season? Like, what is this supposed to be in any way? So all of a sudden, Obama looked good.
And he didn't do anything.
What did he do? He did nothing. That's the joke. But to the American people, you can't believe how stupid the American people are. You know, it's like, I want to tell you something. I'm not afraid of Obama. I'm afraid of America, the American people. How do you vote a guy that's an absolute failure in everything? He had nothing to run on. All he did was mulch it. His whole campaign was nothing more than Moitzi Shemra of Romney. That's what it all was, which is Schrecklach. They say he's one of the worst campaigns in history. All he did was for months and months, Moitzi Shemra, defame, and people were shocked because when they saw the first debate, they realized he's not such a bad guy. He's good. So what does that mean? So the average person would have said, so how dare you do this to Romney? That alone should have been the reason why Obama failed. Where's his character? What kind of a character is it when a guy's Moitzi Shemra for months, another guy? What kind of a character is that? You see. But of course, where is the morality of America? It's in dread. Where is the seichel of America? In dread. It's nowhere. It's nowhere to be found. Because Americans are stupid. They voted for a guy that is an absolute failure in every policy that he did. And not only that, he's dangerous for the country. Because Obama is interested in doing what? In socializing America. He wants big government, big tax. Well, America doesn't even know what's going to hit them in the next 4 years. You see. But why? Sandy. All of a sudden he comes out looking good. Like he cares. You know? It's insane. Why? Because the Russian wants Obama in. It's absolutely incredible. In fact, he did the same thing by, what's his name, John, who ran against Obama the first time? McCain. Remember what happened? Why did McCain lose? You know, in September, McCain was actually neck and neck, or he was ahead of, what's his name, Obama. You know why he lost? Because the economy tanked. The whole economy collapsed. Right before the election. So then everybody said, we don't want McCain. It's another government guy. It's another part of the establishment. And all of a sudden everybody voted for Obama. Because the Russian wants Obama in. You see, because he's an Arab lover. That's really what he is. Why else would a guy bow down to Saudi Arabia? Because Saudi Arabia, whatever the guy's name is, Abdullah, whatever, he represents Islam. Because the Quran, Muhammad is from where? Saudi Arabia. And he really is even if he's not a Muslim, which is really a big question if he is, he's clearly a Muslim sympathizer. It's really what he is. He's he's the worst president Israel has ever had in terms of his relationship with Israel. But the Russian wants that in. Why? Because you need an American president to be with the Arabs and against Israel. Why? Because that emboldens the Arabs to make war. Look what's going on now. Would you believe that the Arabs are shelling Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim? This is unheard of. Whatever the reason is. Because they're not afraid of Israel. The Rebbe has accomplished what he set out. And since the Erev Rav, and of course that's why the Erev Rav is Shelek, because they're the only ones that would give away everything to the Arabs, showing them that they're nobody, they're paper tigers. That's one of the functions of the Erev Rav. Only the Erev Rav would have given everything away to the Arabs, thereby reducing the fear. So interesting, isn't it? You know, since September 1989, look at the scenario. Everything that allows the Arabs to win, to be emboldened, they were successful. Straight through. Talking about wars, Oslo and Clinton, all of them were there, right, as part of the way to pave the way where the Arabs will lose their fear of Israel and they will be emboldened to make war with Israel. Ultimately, I think, to give Israel back to the Jews, Apiteva. That's the scenario of all of this. And therefore, Obama wins. Against all odds, Obama wins. Without any record whatsoever. He didn't run on a record. He ran on bad-mouthing Romney. With notwithstanding all of this, Obama wins. Because the Belgium needs Obama. He needs the Arabs to feel that they can win and destroy Israel. And with Obama, they feel that. With Romney, they wouldn't. So, where are we now? That's what you're seeing now. It's unheard of that the Arabs would even think of sending anything to Tel Aviv or to Jerusalem. It's unheard of. That's what's frightening. Why are they so powerful in themselves that they even think they can get away with this? Because the last 20 years of what's been happening. So we now understand a certain amount of the divide agenda, what's happening now, and so on. And ultimately speaking, that's the reason for Gaza, it's the reason for Clinton. It's the reason for all of this. Lebanese war, Hamas, Arafat, the UN, Lebanese war, Arab Spring, all of it is one thing, to embolden the Arabs to make war. And now after Obama won, that's why they did that, because Obama won. What's Obama going to say? Of course he said, they should do whatever they can to defend. What's he going to say? Restrain yourself? He can't say that, or else it's ridiculous. But ultimately they know that he's an Arab sympathizer. It's really what he is. So they're not afraid. Because they know when push comes to shove, they can get him to do whatever they want. That's where we stand. 2012, right? After Sheish V'chetzi, after 12:30, look at the acceleration of what's going on. And now what's even the worst thing, of course, is that the Muslim Brotherhood is in charge of Egypt, which has the most powerful army, Air Force and Navy, after Israel. So they actually have everything. What does it take for all the Arabs to combine themselves for the last great attempt to destroy the Zionist entity, as they call it? Nothing. Between Egypt, between Egypt, now Libya is also Muslim Brotherhood. Syria is going to fall to the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay? And then you have Jordan, and you have Lebanon, and Iran, so on. All of them. What are they going to do? They're all going to get together and make the final attempt to destroy Israel. That's really what's going to happen. And this is the underlying concept of what's been happening the last 20 years. So you see, based on Hashkafa, you can see what's happening and why. Okay. That's an analysis of the last 20 years in terms of the Arabs and the Jews and what's coming up.
You
The
feel
massive
that
war.
Israel isn't going to respond now?
What was that?
You feel that Israel will not retaliate now?
Well, they're not retaliating. They didn't declare
It's not
war.
over yet.
Yeah, they didn't declare war. How could you not declare war?
They're mustering all the reserves. It's time to muster
Before
reserves.
I came here, a text said that Netanyahu contacted Obama to say he's not going to put in ground troops unless there's, chas v'sholom, serious casualties. He's answering to Obama. I mean, you brought it up. Let's say shells are dropping on Paris, or or New York or Chicago.
Who'd wait?
Hundreds of shells dropping
Who
on.
would wait? Would the U.S. wait
That's what the
if
text
Canada
said.
was sending missiles to New York
Exactly.
City? What a
Look at
crazy!
Cuban Missile Crisis. They weren't doing anything. They were just sitting there minding their own
Besides,
business.
Jewish lives don't mean anything to him. What is it? We'll wait.
No, but he's using the Air Force
He
to
wants to
demolish their
unite.
infrastructure They just demolished their consulate, their embassies, and all they're doing.
Stations, yeah, yes,
And
precisely.
don't forget that if they put in ground troops can get killed also.
Whatever they do,
There's
to
casualties.
stop it, period. It's
Not
not
scared.
Some terrorists. Terrorism is
No,
not
he's not scared.
buildings.
They're not scared of Egypt.
What?
They have
Terrorism
already
is not
planned
buildings.
in
Buildings
case
are meaningless to
Egypt
a
goes,
terrorist.
of course.
What?
They've been preparing
That's
for
what the
this for
Lebanese
years.
or the-
Years.
Look, the hesitancy of the Israeli government shows the Arabs that they're afraid. For whatever it is, either they're afraid of world opinion, Israel is afraid of world opinion. And no matter what Israel does, they will be condemned. And they know that. No matter what they do, they will be condemned in the United Nations. And they'll be condemned by all the other crazy Europeans, and so on. That's one of the main
There's
reasons.
another consideration probably also. He doesn't want the United Nations to recognize the PLO in the whatever he wants to do also.
Yeah,
And he feels that if he's going to go too strong,
but that's
they might recognize him. So he's he's doing a balancing act over here.
yeah,
too.
yeah. They're afraid to go to war, and the Arabs see that they can send missiles to Tel Aviv, and he does nothing. So what's the big deal?
I was talking to a World War II veteran once. I was waiting for my car to be fixed, and they had a television up there. And he doesn't go for any of the monkey business today. He fought in World War II. It was a different world, and he says, it was not Jewish. He said, when Israel's sitting down with these guys after it makes you think they did do something wrong. It makes people think maybe they did take something that doesn't belong to them.
To Israel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what this guy said. From
Yeah.
that day, World War II, no nonsense type of guy. He was a much older guy. I said,
Sure.
why do they want to target this guy? This is an enemy. Maybe they did take. It makes everyone think.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
sympathized with
They
Israel and said,
legitimize the claim
world
of the
is
Arab.
gonna-
That's exactly what it is.
Maybe they did take something that didn't belong.
Well,
to
that's
them.
what I mean. When you sit down, they gave legitimacy to the Arab claim. That's what Oslo is all about. That you have a chelik in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore we were wrong. What they did was terrible. It's incredible how Israeli leaders are destroying Israel, and their refusal to do anything is just destroying
But you're
them.
saying it's a good thing.
Well, I'm just showing you as part of what the
Part of
agenda
plan,
is.
because
But I want to tell you
eventually come
something.
to their,
You understand? The Russian does what he does, but we can't go along with that because Jews die. Not only that, the whole Eretz Yisrael is a sakona. Sakona is the fascist in Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you give Gaza back? It's not only
Why
Eretz
don't they
Yisrael.
retake-
How do
they
you
should
give Gaza
retake what
back
they gave
to
back.
people that want to destroy Israel? That's all they did. It's going to kill their tourist industry. Who's going to go to Israel now?
As a matter of fact, Sharon, at the time that he gave back that, what was the name of that settlement right by Gaza? Gush Katif.
Yeah.
He said that if they're going to renege on what they're saying, they're going to retake Gush Katif. That's what Sharon said at the time.
It's all nothing. It means nothing. These guys never. I know the guys go always threatening. Well, if you don't stop this, we're gonna. What do you mean you don't stop this? Been doing this for 20 years. How much do they have to do before you go in and retaliate? And Cast Lead was a terrible mistake.
Why?
They should have gone in and killed them. It's like the mafia guy. When you put somebody down, like they say, you don't put him down. You kill him. If not, he'll come after you. And not only kill him, you kill his wife, his kids, because they can all come back for revenge. No, these guys know. You see, they're
But
experts.
there's world opinion also involved here.
Whatever it is, but I want to tell you some world opinion. Imagine a guy moves in across the street from you. What choice do you have? Imagine a guy moves in across the street from you, right? And he's got his window facing your apartment, right? And then all of a sudden you see the guy, he takes a machine gun, or a Gatling gun. You ever see Gatling guns? It goes round and round and round, and he's aiming it right for you, right? And I'm just aiming for you, right? And then you see the guy's got all kinds of grenade throwers and all that, and it's all aimed at your apartment. And then the guy, and then the guy calls you up and says, by the way, I want to kill you and your own mishpacha, right? And all of a sudden, the people in your apartment building says, no, you can't do anything because, whatever, he's helping us out with the rent, whatever. What do you mean he's helping out? The guy's going to kill me and my whole family. What bravery do you have? Forget about world opinion. What bravery do you have? The guy says he's going to kill you. He's got all the armaments. He has revealed his intent hundreds of times. He's got the weapons for it, and he's killing you slowly. He's taking out your people. What more does he have to do to prove what this guy wants? You know, it's like you're up against the wall. Who cares about? Forget about world opinion. You know, they have to stand up for themselves. And now you look at any country in the world and say, how dare you tell me that I can't defend myself? What kind of a havamin is that? What do you mean, I can't defend my own citizens? Everybody knows what the Arabs want to do. Everybody knows what the Arabs want to do. Everybody. You know the Arabs want to destroy Israel. Everybody knows this. They don't care because it's all part of their agenda of anti-Semitism. You see, so they can say, we'll leave you in one
Is
piece.
this part of the plan that the Chazon Ish said that the Medina would only last 70 years?
I don't know if he said that. I really know, you know.
But on the other hand, you said it, one of the primary variables in this is our teshuva and our mitzvahs. So in a time when Russian Jews can now be Jews, the teshuva movement is at record level, people can go to yeshivas all over, why are we adding to the pot more positive things?
Why? So what you're saying? What are you saying?
And after Russia fell, now you have Russian Jews that can practice Judaism, you have bris milah,
Okay,
etc.
so
The
therefore,
teshuva movement is on record levels. People can go to yeshivas more freely than ever anywhere around the world.
So what's your question?
Why are we adding to the pot of more good things happening?
why are we?
Why are we not adding?
Who says we're not adding?
I thought maybe these terrible things were happening because of some
That's the
lack
one.
maybe in our tshuva or mitzvah.
No, I believe all of this is to get Jews back into Israel without any Arabs. You know, the Moshe says, I swore to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that this is your land. Everybody knows the promise God
Do you
made.
feel that this will culminate in Milchamas Gog and Magog?
No, it's not even Gog and Magog. Because Gog and Magog is a messianic war. You need Mashiach ben Yosef to appear.
So are we close to that, in your opinion?
Well, I believe there are two major wars coming up. One is this, and the second is the war between Yishmael and Edom. It's a war of civilization.
Between Yishmael and Edom?
Yes.
And Israel won't
That's
be
the
involved?
next clash.
And Israel won't be involved?
No, they will have. It's interesting, you know. It's look exactly how the Baruch runs this. Unknown. We don't know. You know.
Do you feel the
Whatever.
European nations will be involved in
Not me. The
American
Medrash
issues?
says that.
There's runoff.
The Medrash and none of in Yoel. If you look at Yoel Dalet, at the end of Yoel, it says that Yishmael will destroy Esav and Esav will destroy Yishmael. They're going to destroy each other.
And
There's a
where
big
will
incredible
Israel
midrashim
fit
on
into
this.
scheme of things?
What?
Where are the Yidden going to fit into these scheme of things?
Well, I believe that I didn't get into the World Trade Center. Why that happened? I left that out, by the way. That was a major event, you know. But fundamentally, it pits America against the Arabs. That's what it does. Look, Obama is a sympathizer, but not America. America is very worried about the Arabs, about the Yishmael. All terrorism today is committed by Arabs. America's Edom, yes. Yeah, everybody's worried. The only one who sympathizes with them is Obama, nobody else, and the politically correct people who are crazy. They're the ones who sympathize. But the American people don't want this. They're very much afraid of the Muslims because all terrorism is committed by that. So what the Baruch did is it's like World War II, which is very interesting. You know, he got Japan to attack America, which was idiotic. Didn't make sense. What are you attacking America for? First consolidate the Pacific, where you will rule the Pacific, and then you'll bomb Pearl Harbor. So they bombed Pearl Harbor prematurely. In fact, their major guy, the head of the Navy, his name was Yamamoto. Famous statement. He said, I only fear, he was opposed to this. I only fear that we have awakened, it's interesting what he said, I only fear that we have awakened a sleeping giant, America, and filled it with a terrible resolve to kill us. He's right. That's what brought America into the war. So the question really is, why did Japan do it? We're a bunch of idiots. You know, and we know the answer. Because you had to bring America into the war in order to save the Jews in Europe. Because it was America's entry into the war that stopped the Nazis. If America hadn't won the war, holy
In
levachas.
fact, there are books that are written that Roosevelt knew. Roosevelt wanted to end the war. It was the rest of the United States that didn't want. They were isolationists. And he wanted to help, not to help the Jews, he wanted to save Britain. He wanted to save the Western civilization. But how do you do that? So he had the intelligence that they were going to attack Pearl Harbor.
So
But he
yeah, I
didn't
think
say
he was
anything.
it. But he didn't say it because he wanted to
Because
have.
he wanted it to
Yeah,
happen.
pretext
so
to
that-
enter the war, yeah.
Have a pretext to enter the war.
Yeah, yeah. That's what they say, but I don't know if it's true. But the main thing is that why did Japan do it? Because the British wanted them to do it. Because we needed Japan to get America to enter the war and to destroy the Nazis. Same thing here. What the Bonsham done is he allowed the Yishmael, because he's an idiot, Osama bin Laden. Was he crazy? You can't start up with America and take down the World Trade Center. You know, of course, what it did is it got America to go after them and eventually kill them all, you know. So why did he do it?
They're a bunch of Adams, that's why.
No. Because the Russians wanted Yishmael to do this to alert America of who the Arabs are, you see. So even though the president is a sympathizer, America is really against them. And that's the beginning of the setup between the clash of civilizations. Between America, Western Europe. Listen, you don't realize what's happening, you know. Western Europe is becoming Islamicized. It's only a matter of time. You know, I mean, you go to countries, you know, France, 1/3 of all the one out of every 3 people born in France is a Muslim. You aware of that? You know, it's only a matter of time. By the year 2020, more than half of France will be Muslim. And guess what they're going to all do? They're going to burn down the Louvre because all the painting. You know, that's what Arabs are, right? So what do you think is going to happen when the Arabs and they're growing by leaps and bounds? Look, England is filled with Muslims. You know, France, Spain. What do you call it? Holland, Sweden. They're all over the place, and you can't stop them anymore. You see. So what's going to happen? I'll tell you. Because once they reach a certain majority, the Arabs, what's going to happen? They're going to vote their guys in. Democracy. Democracy is going to be the worst enemy. But what do you think they're going to do, the Europeans? They're not going to allow this to happen. So there's going to be a massive civil war in the countries of Europe, white against Muslim. And that's the clash of Edom. That's what's happening, you know. So Europe is dying, really, in the end. So there's going to be an incredible clash of civilizations between the Muslim world. Listen, there's 1.5 billion Muslims on the planet. There are 2 billion Christians, okay? What happens when the Muslims become 2 billion Muslims? Islam is the fastest growing religion on earth. And they multiply, they have like 15 kids, whatever, right? What's going to happen when...
And they're suicidal.
Yes, they don't mind, like the Japs, right? What's going to happen when all of a sudden half of Islam, when there's 2 billion Muslims? What happens? War. The old Crusades are all back again. Because a Muslim cannot tolerate, a Muslim can only exist in 2 states. Either he is subdued or he subdues you. There's no such thing, and Islam does not allow for equality. It doesn't allow for equality with any other religion or any other race. Theologically, they have to subdue you or you subdue them, you know. But once you let them out, it's only a matter of time until they subdue you, then it's a war. Jihad.
Who's going to win that one?
Oh, so you're looking at classic jihad. That's what's happened. You're looking at the end, in many ways, you're looking at the end of the planet. We don't realize that. And the war between Edom, between the West and the East, Islam, you know, is going to make the Crusades look like a kindergarten. Because then they had a sword. So how many guys can you kill with a sword? After a while, your hand got tired. Today, it's either terrorism or nuclear device. You know, that's what's going to happen. We're sitting here peacefully in New Jersey or whatever, right? It's okay. But we don't realize what's happening. Europe is being taken over by Islam. Europe, you know? And America is being taken over by who? Not Islam. America is being taken over by third world countries. Mexico, Hispanics. There's 40 million Hispanics in the United States now. By the year 2050, the majority of America will be foreigners. What's that? 46 years from now? Not 36 years from now? You know, it's America itself is going down the drain. It was third world countries, foreigners will be the majority of the American people. So English will no longer be the language, right? It'll be Spanish, whatever it's going to be, you know? But you walk around, how many Mexicans are in Lakewood? Right? They're all over the place. Between the blacks are 36% of the population, and Hispanics are 39. The Hispanics are the majority of what? Unbelievable, 39% of the population, percent, whatever that is, and so, so between them and then the Asians, the Vietnamese, and all that, 50% of the country of America, we know now America, by the year 2050, the majority of America will be foreigners, or third world guys. That's the end of America.
What does China sit during this? China seems to have some rapport with Israel, if not just in technology and business. And
Well, look, the nations that, if history continues the way it is, so the greatest nations on earth ultimately will be China and India. Their economies are going like crazy, and America is going down the tubes. This is because good old Obama and his policies and so on. He wants to socialize America when all the social policies have been a disaster for Europe. This world is changing, not only weather-wise and so on, but it's changing politically. It's changing in demographics and so on. We don't even know what the next 30 years are going to be. But it's not going to happen anyway, because Mashiach is going to be here before all of this happens, and so on. But we're looking at two major wars, I predict. One is between Israel. What?
Which one first?
I think what's first is Arabs and the Jews. That'll go first. And then you'll have Islam and the West. You're looking at two major wars coming up. Terrible.
One way you said the point is to give Eretz Israel to Jews. What's the other war? What's its point?
That's a messianic war.
What's its tachlis?
It's where the world realizes that their way of life is over. And therefore Goyig from the land of Magog will attack the Jews, to reassert their way of life. And that's the end. It's the same concept with Paroi. In the end, Paroi attacked the Jews because he realized the Jews are escaping. It's the second phase of the war. So Amalek, and that's the war of Amalek. That's where Amalek comes in, where the world realizes that the Jews are about to, their way of life is succeeding. But that's a messianic war. That's when Mashiach ben Yosef already exists.
You said that you felt that
Anyway.
one of the great turning points was the unification of Germany again.
Yes.
Why was that a great turning point?
Because Germany is Amalek.
You feel that Germany is Amalek.
Yes.
And ultimately they're going to fight the Muhammad and others.
It's hard to know if they're the ones who are going to do it, and so on, or it's Germany with Europe. Things change, things move.
With Russia.
Russia or Putin, Putin.
We don't know the kids how it's going to turn out.
Listen, only the Moshe knows exactly what will happen. I can just look at patterns based on Hashkofa and the concept of the persecuted nations and the fall of Edom and the clash, and in the end it's Chazals. But Chazals are, when you look at Chazals, they're fragments. So you need to put them all together into a pattern. That's what I'm doing for you. I've just put 20 years into a pattern, right? Until now, it was just, you have Clinton, you have Oslo, and you have Rabin, you have Arafat, and then you have Gaza. They all look separate. Each thing looked like an individual event. But what I've just done is create a pattern for you that you see, wait a minute. It's actually following a logic here. And the end of that is a war between Israel and the Arabs. Why? Because the Baruch Hashem swore that it's our land. And he wants to, I believe the Jews will get back Israel before Mashiach comes. Not after he comes. What?
You all will be through the Israeli army or through other...
Well, it's a war between the Arabs and the Jews. And therefore, they have to evict the Arabs. It's suicide.
I think the Israelis should say, Russia, this belongs to us because the Torah gave us this land.
But they don't say that.
If that's what they would say.
That's the Erev Rav. If that there was one Arab, I forgot his name.
Stop paying attention.
There was one Arab who was in prison. He says the Jews are finished. So they asked him why. He was a prisoner in wherever prison. So he says because the Jews don't even claim Israel as based on their heritage. They don't. That's the whole point. The Erev Rav doesn't say that it's Eretz Yisrael, Okay.